Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome, everyone, to Project Management Office Hours, broadcasting to you live today from the new Phoenix Business RadioX studio in Tempe, Arizona. I'm your host, Joe Pusz, PMO Joe, and for the next hour, we'll be talking project management with our special guests we have with us today in studio. Also want to thank Mac6 for hosting us here. It's such a good honor to have them with us, so appreciate that. And also want to thank our show sponsors, Talaya. Talaya is a European-based company with 8 years of experience with customers across Europe, Asia, Latin America, and they are expanding their business into the U.S. market. They're sponsoring our show, and we will actually have someone on from Talaya next show on July 19th, so we're looking forward to that. Talaya has an open PPM project portfolio management solution, and you can visit their website, www.talaia-openppm.com, and sign up for a free 30-day trial. Also want to thank the PMO squad, where project management with a purpose is our number one focus, and we specialize in all things project management. Now, before we get in with our guest today, I also wanted to acknowledge today is our 10th episode. So very excited to say that I guess we've made it. I don't know what that means, but we're not a one and done, and we're certainly enjoying what we're doing. I think we're providing value to our listeners, and we're certainly spreading the message of project management. So it's been great. Thank you to all the guests we've had on, as well as for all the ones that we have planned in our upcoming episodes. Also want to mention last Friday, I happened to present, was a speaker for the PMI Chandler breakfast meeting, and we talked about how to make a lasting impact with your organization through organizational project management, not just project execution. Often the way I relate that to folks is if you want to get hot water out of your faucet, you turn the hot water on. And that will run for 20, 15 minutes, however long it goes, but then you run out of hot water. Unless you fix your plumbing, you really can't get an endless amount of hot water. But project management's the same way. You can go into the project execution side, the project delivery side, and you can make that project go well. But that doesn't ensure the next project's going to go well. The way we try to fix that is we go after the organizational setup and make the improvements within the organization to give you a tankless hot water heater without your house. And that was a great opportunity to talk with Chandler PMI organization, and enjoyed that. And we're actually going to have one of the leaders of that group on as a guest also on July 19th. So our next show is going to be great. Enough about me and enough about what I've been up to lately. Let's get into it with our guest today. First, we've got Miguel Tapasco from Dignity Health, and also Brian Rensing from Zane Tate. So thank you, Brian, and thank you, Miguel, for being on. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk some project management. I think all of us here, which is great, have some background in healthcare and with leadership positions in project management. Miguel, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Dignity Health and share a little bit with our listeners?
All right. So I've been with the Dignity Health organization since 2013, started there as a contractor, came on for a major revenue cycle program that they had, managed that till the contract expiration in 2017. And then I transitioned onto a full-time role with them with they have a subset of business units called Clinically Integrated Networks, Arizona, and one of them is called the Arizona Care Network. So I'm currently a project manager with the Arizona Care Network, have been since January of this year. As far as my healthcare background goes, I started in 99 pushing patients around. I would take them from one unit to the next, and then transitioned into the emergency department there, worked admissions, inpatient, outpatient. Never did any clinical type work, but I was always there on the floor within the hospital there at Tucson Medical Center in Tucson, Arizona. And then I kind of just transitioned into the business side of things, rev cycle and PM work and things like that. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed that. Still enjoy it today.
That's great, because when you then can bring to project management, that hands-on experience that probably a lot of other project managers really can't bring. So that's fantastic.
I've been fortunate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brian, how about yourself? Let us know a little bit about you and introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah. So thanks, Joe, and great to meet you in person, Miguel. And so, my background, I've got a wide range of experience in high tech, CPG, retail, and probably the most exciting role that I had was actually in healthcare, working with a company that was owned by Procter & Gamble and was a network of primary care physicians doing concierge medicine. So it was really interesting because you had aspects of B2B and B2C. The customer experience was really, really important. And there was a lot of the product was fairly simple and straightforward to understand, but a lot of complexity in delivering that. And a lot of the projects that we had, dealt across that spectrum of relationships and engagement. So project management was really critical to sort of pull that all together.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being on. I also want to mention to our listeners, since we are coming to you live right now, if you have a question for Miguel, Brian, or myself, feel free to tweet that to us using hashtag PMO Joe. We're going to monitor Twitter. If you have a question for us, we'll get to that live on air. So here we go. Project management to me is not something that people go to college for necessarily, right? You don't get a degree in project management generally and walk into a role where you're going to run $1 million project with no experience, right? You have to work your way up to that. Miguel, you shared with us a little bit about your journey through the healthcare organization, but how did you get really into project management? Why did you end up in that space?
So in 2004, I got my undergraduate degree in information technology. So that really sparked my interest in IT work. And so with revenue cycle, there's in healthcare, there's a lot of IT components. And so I worked for the patient financial services department there in Tucson Medical Center. And so I really got, just saw a need for some real project management within the offices there and started working on projects just informally. Just myself and working through those things as well. At that time, Tucson Medical Center did not have a PMO. They did have project managers. It was a little bit of the Wild West, but project managers did several different ways that they did things. And so, I kind of developed my own style in managing some of the projects that I did down there. And then I actually, that sparked my interest in actually going and getting a degree in project management. So I did wind up doing that, later on. So in 2006, NAU had a great graduate program that focused in on project management. And so from there, I just really just sparked my interest and I kind of took off. And so I started working through that, started applying some of those principles at Tucson Medical Center. I eventually did wind up getting my PMP in 2013. And then I moved from there. I had some opportunities to actually branch out away from healthcare, but I decided to stay in it. Dignity had a great opportunity here. And so just from there, and working when I was at Dignity Health IT, they actually have quite a mature PMO there. They already had something established, but it was exciting to move into that role because they're a fairly large organization. So they had over 100 IT PMs working there in that office.
Yeah.
So yeah, in addition to all the program managers and program directors and analysts and things like that. So really was able to get that big project exposure, that big PMO exposure there. And, but I still had an opportunity to help contribute to the PMO there. They gave me an opportunity to do that. They were migrating to a PPM, a project and portfolio management software called PlanView. And so I had an opportunity to get my hands around that and really become a SME there, help coach other project managers, and things like that. Really got my hands around a lot of project management, the finance component and the budget components of managing projects as well, which is super important. I think something that isn't paid too much attention to in the industry at this point. So, just worked there, and that's really helped me a lot transitioning to the Arizona Care Network as well. There wasn't a PMO there when we started. There is a PMO now, and so we're building up and maturing those processes as we go along.
That's great. And I think also you now also provide some instruction in project management at local universities as well.
I do. I've had an opportunity to teach University of Phoenix, healthcare, project management in healthcare. And I'm actually onboarding with Indiana Wesleyan University right now to do, again, some project management courses with them as well. So that's the fun job. The teaching part is the fun.
Yeah. And believe me, I know I'm running a radio show, right? Whoever thought that I would be doing that, but this is the fun part. It's great.
Right.
And the other part that makes it so much fun is I get to meet other leaders like yourself that aren't just practitioners, but they're out there helping to educate others to make our profession really stand out and provide the value that it does to organizations.
Correct.
So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, I don't think you have a traditional project management background, but obviously in leadership positions within organizations, you rely on project management. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how project management has played a role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I like the way Miguel described the evolution that he went through to, basically, as my wife would say, learn project management on the street. You sort of learn it on the ground, trying to just get work done. And you begin to learn that there's a lot more complexity to that because you have so many people and so many pieces involved. And, I'm kind of an accidental IT guy myself. There was a big ERP project at a company that I was working with, and got pulled into a lot of business process reengineering on that, which was really interesting. But you begin to see that, as much as you might want to work on, that piece, the thing that you're focused on, without clear touch points to the other aspects of the project, things can go sideways really quickly. And so, began to see how a lot of that was actually going wrong. And I like to say in those days, people were doing a lot of IT projects incorrectly. Perhaps the biggest aspect of that is they'd buy SAP and implement their old system, right? Mm-hmm. And so you'd have a lot of that. Plus, they didn't know how to execute with discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up at the Gillette company, where I really learned a lot about how to manage a project successfully and how to really do a work breakdown structure. Now, At that time, I would not have been able to call out what a work breakdown structure is. I just observed what good people were doing to execute on these major, complex global projects. And I was really fortunate to get involved with that. And then I had some training that I had gone to, some PMI training, and got to learn the PMBOK a little bit. Never did the
easy
certification.
late night reading that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So maybe that was my problem, but I think it's important to have done the work almost before doing the training. And why is that? Because it's so critical to see how things sort of come together in an academic sense. If you start with the academics, it's almost confusing to sort of see how it would work in real life. So that for me was a really critical thing to sort of see how all of these different pieces, risk management, the financials, the work breakdown structure, communication management, all of these things are so critical in a single discipline. So, as I say, didn't get the certification, but that training sort of carried me forward and helped me drive a lot of discipline and subsequent projects and subsequent work that we did. To me, at the end of the day, it's all about managing the commitment that you're going to make to the business and managing the way you execute against that commitment, and perhaps negotiating. When things do go wrong, you have to renegotiate certain aspects of the project, and you have to be prepared to do that. So that's kind of my experience with it. So
yeah, I think and I stumbled into project management. I didn't even know project management was a career, but at the time I was leading projects, and my boss said, "Hey, do you want to go get certified in project management?" What's that? So what you've been doing for the last year? I didn't even know it was that. And I'm with you, Brian. I think experiencing it before getting your degree in it or your PMP certification, it lets you actually put to use the practical application of the skills, as opposed to trying to learn them and figure out how to go do it. But that's the other beauty of project management, right? There is no one way to do it. It's whatever works for you. can help you get your career path started. So I think 3 different stories for 3 different individuals, and that wouldn't be unique if we went and talked to 5 others.
I think that's actually a really interesting point that you make, that there is no one way. And I think you see people sometimes come into organizations that like to say, well, there is one way. And I'm kind of curious. I mean, Miguel, maybe from a consulting perspective, do you see going into different organizations, it being done in a different way? And certainly as you're building a new PMO, you might build it in a way that is it fits within that culture. So, who is adaptable, you or the organization, or both?
Correct. So we had those challenges with the Arizona Care Network. I came from, working with Dignity Health IT, they have a mature PMO, or what I would consider a mature PMO, and then going into and just DHIT practices heavy waterfall approach. Not much agile there, not much, they're moving into those realms, but really slow moving ships. Waterfall, very traditional on all the phases as we go through.
And that's common in healthcare, right?
Yes.
Because of the nature of how we treat patients and the impact on healthcare.
And I'm discovering that. So Arizona Care Network, completely different. They benefit more from an agile approach, and we are using some Scrum as well within ACN. And it was a bit of a challenge, because when I came in there, I tried to implement a style of project management that was more conducive to the larger IT office with Dignity Health. And it wasn't as nimble, and it didn't meet the needs, what ACN really needed. And so, as we're executing our vision there with the PMO at ACN, we are incorporating lots of heavy Lean Six Sigma practices, as well as PMI practices and traditional practices. But we're first and foremost focusing on ensuring that it's effective for the organization, not the other way around as you're describing it, right? Not saying, well, we're going to make our business fit into the PMI way of doing things. It's the other way around. We're going to take PMI as a baseline. We're going to take some of these Lean Six Sigma strategies as a baseline, and we're going to see how we can use them to fit the needs of the organization. The culture is another huge topic. We can talk about culture for hours. Being able to adapt a culture in the environment for project management. So some challenges we ran into early on as we were setting up the PMO, some things we've been able to adapt to as we move forward. So it's interesting. Yeah, you're correct on that point.
Yeah, we have within the PMO squad, right, when we're helping organizations build a PMO, we follow our PMO process. And the first is, what's your purpose? Right. And too often we find out that the PMO leader has a vision of what they're going to do with their organization. But after a year or two, it's not gaining traction, right? They just can't figure out why it's not fitting into the organization. And when we go in and talk to the leaders of the organization, they have a completely different vision.
Correct.
Right. So for us, it's if you don't define a common purpose that everybody's on board with from a leader's perspective of the organization as well as the PMO, you're going to fail.
Right.
Then the M is you go measure. Whatever our purpose is, how are we actually achieving that? And then again, from the O perspective is then you go optimize, right? Whatever you need to be able to deliver. So to hear you mention how when you started, you had a way of going to do based on Dignity IT's
correct
PMO, you had to fit into so that's the perfect way to go about it, right? Make sure that your purpose aligns with exactly what your organization's trying to do. So it's great to hear that.
Yeah. Another challenge that we had as well, something that I'm understanding, especially with small organizations, is that you have to educate your stakeholders to really accept, to be recipients of what the PMO can offer to the organization. Because if they're not ready to sit in project meetings and understand, help you develop a charter as a project manager, help you manage risks, etc. If they're not receptive or they're not educated on what these things are, they're simply not going to participate to the level that you as a project manager need them to. And so at ACN, we've been able to educate, our stakeholders, educate the people that we're working with, help them understand. It's almost like you're selling it. You're selling PM practices to them to help them understand the benefit, to help them understand and accomplish their goals. So some challenges there I think any organization needs to understand is, you need to have buy-in from your stakeholders in order to successfully execute a PMO.
Yeah, and I know you also mentioned agile versus waterfall, right? Within one organization, really the fit is two different ways. And Brian, what are your thoughts, right? There's this constant struggle in the industry of agile versus waterfall.
Yeah.
I think that's misguided discussion, right, at this point. But I always like to get other people's perspective. So what are your thoughts on this almost religious methodology war that's going on out there?
Yeah. It is a bit of a religious war. And my sense is when it is a religious war in an organization, it reflects more than anything a lack of understanding of either discipline, either approach, either methodology. And, and particularly a lack of understanding of the agile methodology. I like your reformulation of the acronym PMO, purpose, measure, and optimize, because really I think about it in terms of the long game. And as you're building the PMO, you want to think about, yes, the purpose of a specific project, right? And and measure your progress and delivery of that project. But I think the power is really found ultimately in optimizing. And that optimizing is about, well, what did we learn from the execution of, project X as we implement project Y? And how are we improving our ability to forecast what it's going to take to do that? And I think understanding the methodologies that you could be using in those different contexts, which methodology is more successful for which kind of project. I tend to look at it fairly simply, and that is you have a lot of projects that are fairly well defined and understood what they are. It might be an infrastructure project, or it might be maybe it's an ERP implementation. There's not a lot of magic to it. Really kind of what it is that you've got to do. It doesn't take away any of the complexity of it, but it's fairly well defined what you need to do. Waterfall may be entirely appropriate for that in order to manage the delivery against a specified timeline. If, however, you have something where, we're going to go to market with an idea, I don't know quite what it is, and I don't know I've got some general notions of what I think that's going to be, but I need to be able to, learn quickly, and need to be able to deliver value quickly, change course as needed. It's a perfect scenario for Agile, right? Where you can sort of work on delivering that value as quickly as possible, and then changing course as needed. So I think it's important to understand the different context, but I think also the organization and how well it really understands the core purpose of any of this anyway. Like I say, is ultimately managing your commitment and managing your success, right? That really is at the bottom what I need to understand regardless of methodology. And I have to have some core muscle memory to do that. Once I have that, then you start looking at optimizing, whether it's shifting to Lean Six Sigma approaches, or it's getting better at forecasting what it's going to take to do this in a waterfall way. I think both can be successful. It just depends on what's the real context.
I know some of the struggles that organizations run into, because I'm with you. I'm of the mindset I'm a delivery expert. How I get that done doesn't matter. If I go into an organization that's agile, we'll do it agile. If you're waterfall, we'll do it. I don't care, but we're going to deliver the results. But where organizations sometimes tie their own hands is we'll go out and buy PlanView. Mm-hmm. And you're going to make a large investment in a software application that maybe can only deliver one way. Or if it can deliver this is not a knock on PlanView. We support them and their implementations. But if you make that investment, how do you then go change culture and change process and change the tool when you're into a long-term commitment? Miguel, I don't know if you've encountered that in your experience as well.
We did have some challenges with PlanView. There were, PlanView was more, it wasn't so much it was affecting stakeholders. It was more affecting the project managers and the program managers. And there was some pushback. It was a difficult, talking about culture shift. It was a difficult shift for the project managers. They're the ones that struggled with it. I would consider that we had a successful implementation. I think that my ability to readily accept the software helped me put me in a position to be able to promote it and go out there and help educate other project managers and help them bring them on board with that. It wasn't so much of a radical shift of what we had. We had prior a Hewlett Packard PPM system that we were using. And PlanView is great with resource management, awesome with resource management, resource leveling, a little bit more tricky when it comes to schedule management. It's a little bit cumbersome on that end. Great product in some other areas as well. But to your point, I would think it is a little more conducive to a waterfall approach, but that's what Dignity Health IT does. They do waterfall. And so with no firm plans I was just having a conversation with one of their PMO staff just last week where they're trying to incorporate some agile, but waterfall is the way for them. And so something like PlanView really does help. So that's the position that they're in there.
What I hear in your question is a bit of almost a tools first approach to addressing methodology challenges within an organization. And I have seen that fail time and again. And now, and honestly, a tools first approach with anything is really a mistake because you're trying to change something and think that you're going to drop this magic tool in that people are somehow going to start to use. They don't understand the core discipline to begin with. Why is a tool going to make a difference? It isn't. And I think the point again, Miguel, about tool X may be entirely or more supportive of waterfall, but if that's what the organization does, then maybe that's the right choice for them. But probably shouldn't bring in the agile tool and sort of expect that somehow something's going to change. It just won't.
Right.
It just won't.
Yeah, the parallel I always draw with, and I'm a sports fan, right? So I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, go Steelers, and they run a 3-4 defense. So they draft players that play in a 3-4 defense. But if they were to get a new head coach who wanted to switch to a 4-3 defense, they no longer have the players to fit into that methodology or that program, right? So as a former PMO director at Wellstar Health System in Atlanta, we had PlanView. And when we wanted to make an adjustment to a 4-3 defense, we couldn't because we had players, we had tools available to us that kept us in that. So I'm always an advocate of, as Brian mentioned, right? It's not tools first. You use your tools to support your processes, but sometimes leaders get caught up in a situation where they inherited a tool, right? And how do you deal through that? How do you work through those situations where you inherit people, you inherit tools, you inherit process, budgets, et cetera, but you still need to go execute on your projects.
Right. And I really feel like some culture is really a huge part of it. I really have learned that at ACN. You can't just drop in tools and methodologies. You have to educate your people. You have to have them on board with what you're doing. It has to be an organization-wide effort because, a lot of these stakeholders, they have day jobs, right? They have regular jobs. And so to them, sometimes project management is even a nuisance. It's like, oh, another project meeting, another thing I have to help you, project manager, do. And so just culture is it could be a huge roadblock. It has to be something that's in place, a culture strategy to bring people on board. And just with the discussion we're having, agile versus waterfall. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm a traditionalist. I love the waterfall approach. I really am. And so, agile for me is kind of a bit of a cold water bath. It's like, oh my gosh, we're changing scope again. It's like, where's the change request? There is no change request. We're just flowing with it. It's like, I can't. So I have to kind of, take a step back and say, not that change requests are bad. I say change is great so long as it's managed. I don't have a problem with change. Let's just manage it properly. So agile, and then you throw Scrum in there too, which is now we're talking 2 to 4 week sprints, and so it's definitely it's a thing where, like we're talking about in this conversation with healthcare, especially bringing healthcare into an agile and a Scrum approach is a process of evolution that's going to have to happen. Because I'm looking at some of the other industries and project management in other industries, and they've readily adapted it. It's like they're looking for PMs that have agile and Scrum, backgrounds and things of that nature. And in healthcare, that's most of the time it's not even mentioned.
Well, and don't forget the hybrid approaches, right? So I've been on Water Scrum Fall, Agile.
I've heard you say that.
Right. So there isn't one way, I guess. Right.
Correct. And yes, I think that it's good. We're trying to also at ACN adapt hybrid approaches where we're doing some of these 3 to 5 year projects that we have, our contract-based projects. Those are definitely waterfall, but we incorporate portions of Agile and incorporate portions of Scrum within those waterfall approaches, because there may be situations where the project is not performing right, and so it needs a quality improvement component that's better handled via Agile. But it's still the overall project is a waterfall project, but components of it can be better attacked, better strategized through an Agile and Scrum approach.
Absolutely. I think another important thing that often gets overlooked is project managers, and you alluded to this a little bit, Miguel, right? They're leading teams of resources who are not project managers. They have a day job, but they're working on a project. But I think the organization benefits when those resources understand project management. I mean, Brian, have you run into situations where maybe they haven't, or, how do you handle that?
I remember one conversation I was having with a team, and we were talking through something that really needed to get done. I had asked the team to prepare a kind of timeline to help people better understand. I mean, really, the intent was a communication tool more than anything, but it was revealing the response that I got. The guy said, "Yeah, but I'm not a project manager." And I thought, my first thought was, that's the wrong thing to say to me. The second is, I wanted to go through, well, what do you do on the weekend? Because I'm pretty sure that you've got a to-do list, and I'm pretty sure you've got plans around how you're going to attack that to-do list. And, you don't need a PMP to do that. Right. And so my expectation of people coming into a role is that they already have some baseline understanding of that. And, there is no replacement for a, highly trained PMP for a big, hairy project. But really, like, in your day-to-day, in a lot of the projects that we have, and with resources being scarce, you're not always going to have a project manager assigned to your work. Therefore, it's up to you to figure that out. And I don't expect that everybody has, understands, well, what risk management is, because frankly, we can have that conversation. I just want to see that somebody's willing to learn, open-minded about trying to understand that, and, and adapts to whatever it is that they're, expected to deliver. So, that goes back to the learning it on the street. It really is more about doing than it is about, anything, right? And best way to learn is to do. Mm-hmm. So, you can always find great teachers and project managers that are good mentors along the way to help you through that and make those connections. And if somebody doesn't have that, well, I'll help make that connection.
Right. I'll even make the argument, and I've kind of been brewing over this for a while, that, sometimes at times cannot be a good fit for an organization. There are some organizations that are not ready for those types of structures. They need maybe project managers that aren't maybe as formally educated, maybe a little more that street knowledge you're talking about on the project management side, that may be a little more flexible. So I enjoy PM theory. I love it. Getting conversations with people and they give me blank stares, and, I'm in good company here, but most people are like, I don't want to talk about this with you. And so, you go to these PMI chapter meetings. Oh, it's awesome. It's excellent. But some organizations, I've seen in my experience that sometimes it can be counterproductive. Yeah. So, even as if you do have PMs that are, PMI educated, PMP or Prince 2 or these others, formal methodologies, they still need to keep an open mind. And like we're talking about, it's really all about getting stuff done. And so you need to fit, the methodology into what works for the organization. And that's just something I've had to learn. I've had to learn that, sometimes the PMI way is not the best way for this specific instance.
So I'm curious for both of you. One strategy that I've used in the past is when I bring in contractors to do project work, one expectation I have is, no, you're not just going to deliver this project, but you're going to teach us something about your approach to these things, because I don't assume that our organization knows it all. And I'm always looking for those ways to optimize. So I guess maybe it's a two-part question. Do you see organizations doing that and open to that? And what success have you seen in actually seeing companies start to adopt some of the practices that you have?
Yeah, no, for us, actually, we're working with a client now where we're running a project or multiple projects for them, but we're also training their staff on project management principles, right? Teaching you to fish model, right? We aren't in there as a staffing agency, right? We're on project-based assignments, and our goal is to build a long-term relationship so that when we walk away, you're better off than when we walked in.
Right.
And so I think that is very common. I think it's more common, certainly as project management has gained in its exposure to the business world. But I think it's out there every single day.
Yeah.
And the value to that, of course, is that can be astronomical to a company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. In my experience, coming into ACN in January, they didn't have anything. There was nothing there. And so I had the opportunity with my colleagues and I to be able to build from the ground up, which is a great privilege for me. I mean, there's not a lot of opportunities. Joe, I'm sure you have opportunity to do that in your type of business, but not me to be able to do something just like start a PMO. So, we were able to educate the staff as we went along and say, we're going to be using these tools. But again, it's all about, I keep coming back to that culture, being able to say, is the organization ready for this? Especially in starting a PMO. I mean, I've discovered some, especially smaller organizations, sometimes a PMO is not the right tool for them. It doesn't mean they can't use project management, but they just don't need a project management office. And then sometimes, in my opinion, a PMO, one of the biggest benefits of a PMO is to have standardization, right? Because I've worked in organizations too where there is no PMO, like I described, it's the Wild West, and everybody's doing all kinds of things. I mean, I've had situations where, I'm working on a project and I say, hey, we're going to develop a charter. And they say, well, when I'm working with PM Joe over there, he doesn't make us do a charter. So we're going to go work with PM Joe because Joe doesn't make us do a charter and he doesn't care about risks and change requests. He doesn't make us fill those out. And here I am trying to put in, trying to adapt ways. So one of the big benefits of a PMO is to be able to say, we're all going to do this together. We're going to work and have a standard and a pattern of the way things happen. So, but it's been, like I said, it's been an evolution there at ACN. The leadership is definitely strong executive support on project management. That's essential, or else you're going to get no traction. You're going to go nowhere. And to your point as well, I've discovered that a lot of organizations now are looking for PMs that are not just going to execute projects. They're looking for real contributors to standardization, to trying to help them grow their PMO. And so I think that's something that all PMs out there need to understand, that our role is evolving to not just come in and, the standard is, I deliver projects on time and under budget. That's my success criteria, whatever that is. It goes far beyond that now.
That's yesterday's news. Yeah. Right. And I think that's a difference too between staffing agencies and consulting services. Right? A staffing agency can get you a project manager to execute a project on time and under budget. But they're probably not going to come in and help you optimize your process and train your resources and make sure that you're doing something that fits your organization, right? They just haven't had those experiences. But in a project management consulting firm, our consultants come in and they are multi-purpose, right? They understand the value of how to lead organizations. Many of them have actually run a PMO before. So it's not just about the execution of the project, but how within your culture can we make a lasting impact? So, Miguel, I think you're spot on with that. And I mean, Brian, great question. Obviously, a good discussion. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about PMI indirectly. We haven't really talked about it directly so much. But, Miguel, what value do you see in the formal project management processes, right? I mean, PMI is a standard.
Correct.
Where's the value in trying to adhere to that as closely as possible?
So I believe in standards. I really do within an organization. I've had to learn to also be flexible with those standards and fit those standards into whatever's good for that organization. But I'm a firm believer. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm a firm believer in the PMI way of doing things. I like it. It's just the way I learned it from the beginning. Like I mentioned, I'm a traditionalist and that's what I like. But of course, I'm not opposed to, in the past, I would probably get in an argument if somebody spoke an ill word against PMI. It's like, what are you doing? but now I'm like, okay, I realize it's not for everyone.
Right.
It's just a flavor of project management is what it is. But I alluding to what I was talking about earlier with the standardization, even if PMI is not your flavor of doing things or whatever, however you're going to do it, I do think that standardizing project management within an organization is important because like I said, I've seen it where even if you have a small PMO staff, you have 5 PMs on staff or whatever it is, if everyone's doing things differently, it's just chaos. Not to say that you set it so rigid to where people don't have autonomy to have their own project management style of doing things. Not that way, because, everyone's different. We have different individuals, but we should have some sort of standards to where people are following certain things. So our stakeholders can expect a level of service from the PMO to say, okay, we're going to do some initiating now. We're going to identify some stakeholders. We're going to do a basic charter. We're going to do a basic schedule. We're going to have a lessons learned session after as part of closeout. We're going to have some project archival. And so some of those things are just important. So to your question, Joe, yes, I believe in standardization. I think it's really important.
And to tie that into a little bit what I talked about earlier, the plumbing, right? That's one of the plumbing components that I had talked about in the PMI chapter was if you're not consistent, how do your resources who aren't project managers, how do they expect to understand what's going to happen?
Correct.
The example I always use, I think I've used it on air in the past, is processing invoices within an organization, right? No matter which department you're in, you don't pay the invoice. You take the invoice and you send it down to accounting. Accounts payable takes care of it and you process the invoice. Everybody in the organization does it that way. Everybody understands it and everybody does it well. But when it comes to a project, everybody thinks, well, I can run a project, and they do it 15 different ways. And now the organization loses that consistency and you don't get the same repeatable value out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Brian, in your leadership roles you've had, right? What have you encountered there?
I think, Miguel, you highlighted that executive support is really critical, and it is. What you're going to have to do as you sell this kind of idea is, take away the mysticism around it. Take away the idea that this is just overhead, because actually standardization, and I don't care how formal that is. There are really some key steps that you need in the process to successfully execute a project, and make that as lightweight as you need to. But those are the guidelines for how it is that you're going to deliver. Standardization is important not for its own sake. Not for project management, because nobody really cares about project management from that perspective. It is about better managing the cost to execute, and are you getting better at executing on projects? And are you delivering that value as quickly as possible and with the level of quality that's expected and with the scope that everybody's agreed on? That at the end of the day is what it's about. And standardization takes the guesswork out of elements of the project where you're not, you don't have a team that is learning on game day how to do this. It's already been defined. It's been formalized somehow within the organization, and you're going to follow those steps. I think where it goes wrong, though, is when you have people who, sometimes you have very eager PMPs that come out and they have their certification, and it becomes this rigid by the book kind of thing, which is going to turn the organization off because you have people who don't know what that's all about. And, it just doesn't put that person in the best place for success. So there is really this give and take, and really understanding in the organization, but understanding what does the organization expect in order to deliver a successful project and meet those expectations. And that has to be something that evolves over time, not from on high necessarily, but it evolves based on a need to improve the way you execute. And how have we planned? How well did we actually execute on that? And because we missed, on whatever dimension, what do we have to do to make sure we don't miss or we get better at managing that particular aspect of the project in the future?
Another thing, right, is we're talking about some of this is advanced concepts of project management, right? Organizational theory, project management theory, PMI, et cetera. But not everybody is there yet, right? Some people are on the junior level. And we know we have an audience here in Phoenix. We know with Talaya, we've now have an audience in Europe and Asia and Latin America and others. What's the message that you have for aspiring project managers, right? Let's start at the beginning, right? As opposed to the sophisticated conversation we've been having. What message do we have for them? Miguel, I mean, what do we tell them?
So for me, I really feel like one of the primary components for success is you just have to have a love for the work. You really do. You got to, in my opinion, you just got to love project management, because if you really despise it and it's not for you, you're not going to be successful at it. Forget about the theory, forget about the standardization processes and all the other things that we talk about. You really just have to enjoy managing people and managing projects and successfully executing. And so that's something that, early on, and people sometimes look at me funny if I say, I love project management. And people are like, you really like this thing? This is not like a stepping stone to some other sort of career you're trying to get to. And I'm like, no, this is it. I love it. I can see myself doing this. And so, it's just, they look at me funny, but everybody's got their different passions, but I think that's a essential element. You can't be like a begrudging project manager where perhaps you started as an analyst and there was an opportunity to promote. So you took the job, but you really don't like it, hoping that you can transition out as fast as you can. You gotta love it.
Well, what are some of the characteristics that I might have? How would I know? If I've never done it before, how am I going to know that I'm going to love it?
So I fell in love with the theory behind it, to be honest with you. I started to, try to manage some projects, and I saw, I think by accident, one of the PC techs had left a copy of Microsoft Project on my computer, and I was supposed to have it, and I opened it up one day and I was like, oh, this is really cool, man. We can put this stuff in here and run these reports. And I didn't know what successors and, dependencies and things like that were, but then I started to it sparked my interest in it. And I moved from there. I think it'd be great if, especially, medium to large size organizations actually maybe conducted some clinics on project management to say, hey, we're holding a clinic on project management. If you're even remotely interested, why don't you come by and see what it's all about? Maybe you could be a successful project manager at our organization. And if you don't want it, and if you don't like it, come and find out, see what it's all about. Because you're right, some people don't know. So that was my experience. I opened up MS Project, I started tinkering with it, and then I started studying theory, and then I fell in love with the work.
Brian, what's your advice for the aspiring PM out there?
Yeah, well, mine might be more generic career advice, and it's fairly simple. You got to come in open-minded and adaptable, and you're coming into a career that is just starting. You don't know it all, and you need to be really observant about what's going on around you and get to know as many people as possible, from the lowest rung of the ladder, right, to the highest rung of the ladder, and identify the people who are doing it really well, who are getting results. Ask them if they'll be a mentor to you, and chances are they will say yes, because they've built a success on the shoulders of others, and they've learned from others, so they're going to give back. So I say you look for those people who are doing that, and that's going to, it is getting as much exposure cross-functionally up and down the ladder, and really hone in on those people who are delivering big results for the company. And you're going to find out, how to do this, and you're going to find out where your passions are. And, I think project managers actually, the more formal that discipline is in an organization, they're actually really good people to know, because they know the people up and down the organization. They know who's delivering, and they know who they want to work with, and they know, if I get put on a project for this other, person or department, it's not going to go so well, and they're going to understand why. and you want to get really close to those people and get to know them.
Yeah, I know for me, I was always drawn to the coach as opposed to the player, right? Or the director of the movie. I love movies, and the director, I always wanted to know who was the director and what their style was. I didn't care about the actor or the conductor of an orchestra, right? So personally, right, for me, my driving force was I want to be where the action is. Projects have the visibility that Brian just talked about. They're the most important thing in the organization because an executive said, we're going to go do this. And when it's over, you're either going to fail or you're going to succeed in the organization to be better. I mean, how cool is that? I'm not in the day-to-day. I get to direct a movie, figuratively speaking, every time we're going to do a project. And to me, that's what makes it so attractive to an aspiring project manager is if you want to go lead change and become a change agent in an organization, doing something that isn't mundane and day after day after day, man, project management's the place to be.
Right.
I just love it. And it's great to have like-minded people in the room, right? It makes it, makes it easy to talk about. So we're getting kind of close to wrapping up here. So maybe just one more question I have. Brian, we'll start with you on this one. We talked a lot about execution and delivery, right? But how do you actually measure success on a project, right? How are you going to know that you've been successful?
Yeah. So historically, I've liked to see, you called it a charter, Miguel. I've called it a blueprint, just some kind of document that represents the triple constraint, the scope, schedule, and resources. What it is that you're going to deliver. I think getting really good about understanding up front what the project is really important to getting better. And being able to articulate that clearly throughout the organization is really important. I then want to see at the conclusion of the project, how did we do? That's all about, really how well did we understand the work that we were going into? How well did we understand our team and its ability to actually deliver within the timeline and budget? And where we went sideways, why did we do that? It's an introspection on that charter or blueprint to better understand and measure success. And to me, measuring success on a given project, it's pretty clear. Okay, on time, on budget, and did we deliver the committed value? That should always be there. But again, as I said earlier, I go for the long game. Are we getting better at managing these projects? Mm-hmm. Are we getting better at forecasting what it is? And I took great pride when I saw this happening in the organizations that I've worked in, when I saw teams that understood and embraced that. When they embraced it, it was more about their, they saw it as their own success that they were managing. So that was success to me.
So for my success factors really is just what kind of value did we provide to the organization? I mean, that's what it is. You can have a project that was done on time and within budget and is an epic failure, honestly. So how readily did those stakeholders, the end users, the people that are the recipients of whatever you're doing, how successful are they as a result of what you implemented? And so looking back at the value of the organization, that's extremely important to me. That's how I measure the success of any project that I'm working on or any group of people that I'm working with. And also, Brian, just talking about expanding on some of the things that you talked about as well. Looking back, doing proper lessons learned. Let's look at where we failed. It doesn't matter how well it went. We didn't do well on something. I've seen projects that, they came in on time, but you had to file 15 different change requests in order for it to come on time. So that's a problem. So technically you're on time, but you had to continue to manage all this change and disruption in order for you to be able to say that it was done on time. So you kind of look at both sides of the coin there and really understand what did we not do well? What did we do well? Take note of that and also communicate that to other project managers and say, hey, heads up. I was working on a project once where this one project, the CEO was heavily involved, but nobody really, it wasn't identified as a possible risk. So we're getting ready to go live and he vetoed the entire thing. And I said, did nobody identify that the CEO was this closely involved, that he had power to veto the whole thing at the last minute? Nobody said anything. And so as a result, we took that in our lessons learned. We communicated that to our other PMs. Hey, when you're working on these types of projects, the CEO is heavily involved. So you need to really stay in tight communication with him, because if you don't, everything can go off the rails. So looking at those lessons learned, identify what we can do better, successfully publicizing those things out to your PMO, saying, hey, these are the things, these are some pitfalls. All of you should be warned. And then just evolving and getting better at what we do.
Well, it's been a great conversation. So Miguel and Brian, thank you so much for being on today. We talked a wide-ranging list of topics from aspiring PMs up to some sophisticated project management theory, and we've learned a lot. Hopefully our listeners have learned a lot as well today. Miguel, give you one last chance here to let our listeners know how they can contact you or understand more about what you have got going on over at the ACN.
Sure. They can contact me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I am under Miguel Tapasco, not Leonardo Tapasco. And so, of course, we got some great things going on at the Arizona Care Network. It's a growing organization. We're doing some really good population health management, helping to keep, the residents of Maricopa County healthy, helping them to understand their health better so that they can live longer, successful lives. And so we've got a great mission over there. And so LinkedIn will probably be the easiest place. And so I'm there, and I share my experiences on there as well. And that's it.
Great. Thanks for being on.
That was a quick hour.
Yeah, it goes by fast. I love it. And Brian, how about you? How can listeners get to know you or contact you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest. In the summary section is my email and phone number. I'm on Twitter also @_BPR_. Strange ID, but I was attached to my BPR, so I had to figure it out, right? So that's probably the best way, and look forward to connecting with any of your listeners, and appreciate your having us on the show.
Yes, it's been great. I just also want to thank our sponsors, PMO Squad first. They are 100% project management focused 100% of the time, providing leadership to set up project management best practices, a PMO, project management training, PM software selection and support, and also project managers to run your key strategic initiatives. And of course, Talaya, our newest sponsor. Talaya has rapid implementation using common language. They integrate well with Microsoft Project, Jira, and others. It's easy to customize, will fit into your organization and give you the opportunity to make your first steps in the governance world following a PMBOK-based software approach, which is unique in the industry. To learn more about that and sign up for a free 30-day trial, visit www.talaya-openppm.com, and Talaya is TALAIA. We will have Talaya and Tom Stokes from PMI Chandler as well as Workday in with us next episode on July 19th. That's it for now. Office hours are closed. Until next time, I'm Joe Pusz, PMO Joe, and you've been listening to Project Management Office Hours, our retrospective on project management lessons learned.